He was asleep, having nightmares again. He was running in a strange pressurized suit through narrow, bleak halls. Part of him knew it was a nightmare for a while, but knowing that didn't seem to help him control it, and gradually he forgot it wasn't real. Something was pursuing him, something with strange tusks in the place of hands and horns sprouting at the joints of its limbs. Its body looked like it had its skin flayed off, or even worse, like someone had taken a human skeleton and pressed raw hamburger to it. The bottom half of its face was falling apart, its eyes gleaming yellow, glittering and burning. He realized he had some kind of weapon, a gun that sent out a whirling blade projected on a beam of light. He kept turning around and firing the thing, watching it cut with a grating sound through the creature's legs, spraying blood and gore all over. Its legs were gone, but it still kept coming, posting the tips of its tusks against the ground and dragging itself forward, moaning. He cut off its arms and then its head, and finally it stopped. Thank God, he thought, and wiped the blood off his face. He had started to turn away when he heard something behind him. The creature was still writhing, flopping his way this way and that, changing with a wet sound. It sprouted new arms and legs. It clambered up, roaring, and was after him again. Screaming, he turned and ran. Bad dreams? Asked the man beside his bed. He was a large man with a square jaw and white hair, dressed in the dark uniform of military intelligence. He was regarding Altman with a steady, aloof gaze. To either side of him were two even larger men who looked like they might be twins dressed in street clothes. At a little distance was another man, smaller and wearing glasses. He looked vaguely familiar, but Altman couldn't quite place him. "Where am I?" asked Altman. "You're in your house," said the military man in Chicxulub. "Where's Ada, your girlfriend?" "She's not here. She's safe." "What do you mean, safe?" asked Altman, starting to get out of the bed. The man raised a finger, calmly but forcefully. The twins to either side of him took Altman by the arms and lowered him back onto the bed, holding him down until he had stopped struggling. Wearily, Altman eyed them. "What are you doing here?" he asked the military man. He made a gesture, and the other two let go and stepped back. "I came to see you," he said. "And who are you?" "Markov," he said. "Craig Markov." "That doesn't tell me anything," said Altman. "No," said Markov, "it doesn't." "And who are they?" he asked, gesturing to the other three men. Markov looked left and right. "These," he said, "these are my new associates." The man with the glasses gave a smirk. "Tim and Tom and Terry." "Which one is which? Does it matter?" asked Markov. "Look," said Altman, "you can't just break in here like this. You have no right to be here." "I'm going to call the police." Markov just smiled. When Altman reached for his phone, he said, "Tom, Tim." The twins moved slowly forward. One of them put his hands on Altman's wrist and squeezed until he dropped the phone. The other punched him once, softly, almost lovingly, in the side. He fell back and on the bed, gasping. Tim and Tom wandered back behind Markov, watching Altman struggle to catch his breath. When he had calmed down, Markov said, "Feeling better, are we?" Would you like a drink of water? Altman shook his head. Markov snapped his fingers, and the man with the glasses tossed Altman a shirt and a pair of pants. You're in the right frame of mind now, said Markov. Get dressed. We're going to have a little talk. A few minutes later, he was sitting across the kitchen table from Markov, the other three standing next to the doors leading in and out of the room. It's very simple, said Markov. You filed a grant to investigate Chicxulub crater. There's nothing wrong with that, argued Altman. That's what scientists do. I've already spoken to your friends, said Markov, or rather my associates have. We've determined that the person motivating this grant apocalyptication was you. So, Markov gave him a cold look. Don't get cocky. If I have to, I'll have Tim break your arm, he said. Or Tom, said one of the twins from where he stood near the door. Or Tom, said Markov. He turned and looked at the twin. Don't worry, Tom. He has 2 arms, enough to go around. Then he turned back to Altman, looked at him with one eyebrow raised. I'm sorry, Altman said. What? That's better, said Markov. Your proposal for investigating the crater has been pulled from the grant proposal pool. It is now classified. The investigation of the Chicxulub crater has become a military matter. So I was right, said Altman. About what? Asked Markov. You're not just trying to retrieve the submarine. You're trying to get at whatever is in the crater. You're a clever boy, said Markov. Maybe too clever for your own good. For the reason I'm here is to find out how much you know and evaluate whether you would be a valuable member of our team. If you are, I am prepared to allow you to join us in a limited capacity, of course. If not, I'll have to figure out something else to do with you. What do you mean by something else? Markov shrugged. Could be shipped you back to your own sector. Could be having you put in confinement for as long as it takes us to complete the project. Could be something a bit more serious. Behind him, the twins exchanged glances and smiled. I suppose, Mr. Altman, it's up to you. Markov straightened in his chair, put both his hands palm down on the table. Well, Mr. Altman, shall we begin? Markov started off slow. How did you first realize there was something unusual going on in the crater? I detected a gravitation anomaly. It wasn't the pulse signal? Altman shook his head. The pulse signal came later. Who told you about the pulse signal? Altman hesitated, tempted to lie, and then he realized it didn't matter. Hammond was dead. And then suddenly it clicked. He knew where he had seen the man with the glasses. Charles Hammond told me. He said, I believe your associates knew him. Markov looked back at Terry. The latter hesitated. A moment, nodded. But we didn't kill him, said Tim. No, we didn't kill him, said Tom. No talking shop here, boys, said Markov. Terry, why don't you take Tim and Tom and wait for me outside? The 3 of them quietly left the room. How do I know you are who you say you are? Asked Altman. Markov turned back and his gaze steady. I wonder when you were going to get around to that. Either I am or I'm not, he said. If I am, then it'll be worth your while to cooperate. If it will get you on the expedition. If I'm not, then there's very little you. can do about it. Whether you tell me the truth or not, you're probably in trouble either way. Tell me, what do you think you know? It's a reasonable enough gamble, thought Altman. I know that Dredge Corp is working with the military to salvage the submarine, so chances are he is what he says he is. The trick is knowing how to tell him enough to get him to bring me aboard on the project, but not so much that he thinks he's already gotten all he can out of me, that he doesn't need me anymore. He took a deep breath. I'd guess there's something in the heart of the crater, said Altman. Not a neutral phenomenon, but something else. Go on, said Markov. Considering its location, it must have been there a very long time. How long? It might have been there thousands of years or even longer. Why do you think so? The Yucatec may have a kind of mythology surrounding it. They call it the tale of the devil. He saw a gleam of something in Markov's eyes. You've told me something I didn't know, Altman, he said. How did you find this out? I'll give you more details if you bring me in on the project. Markov nodded, his lips tight. I'll let you get away with that for a few minutes anyway. What do you think it is? He asked. I have no fucking idea, said Altman. There's no room on the team for someone who doesn't have imagination. What do you think it could be? Altman looked down at the tabletop, at his hands resting clasped together on it, at Markov's hand still palm down on the other side. I thought at first it might be a relic from some ancient civilization, but I've thought a lot about it, he said, and the only other thing I can come up with frightens me. He looked up, met Markov's gaze, an object sending a pulse signal from the center of a vast crater, perhaps buried since the creation of the crater thousands of or hundreds of thousands, even millions of years ago. What if it wasn't an asteroid that made the crater, but the other object itself striking the Earth? Markov nodded, which suggests that it was something that came from outer space, said Altman, which is turning suggestions that it was something sent here by intelligent life outside of our system, galaxy, which raises the question of why it was transmitted, said Markov, and who it was transmitted to, said Altman, and what. They sat in silence for a while. If that's what it is, Altman said, it'll change our whole understanding of life as we know it. Markov nodded, finally removing his hands from the table and putting them in his laps. When they returned, there was a gun in one of them. Ah, Altman, he said. What am I going to do with you? Are you threatening me? Asked Altman, his voice rising. He hoped he sounded tough and angry, that Markov wasn't detecting the fear that he felt. You obviously have guessed too much to be let go. You've even guessed too much for me to just throw you in confinement. I have to decide whether to kill you or take you with us. Altman slowly raised his hand. I'd rather you took me with you, he said, a quiver to his voice now. Not a shock preference, consider the circumstances. Take you or shoot you, he mused. I can see advantages to both. Can you tell me anything else to tip the scales? Is there something else you've forgotten to add? Altman kept his hands crossed afraid that if he moved them, Markov would see how much he was shaking. His mouth was very dry. His voice, when he began to speak, trembled. "There is one other thing," he said. "Yes," said Markov, casually cocking the gun. "The villagers found something, a strange creature, humanoid but not human, that they'll convince is connected to the happenings in the crater. They burned it, but there are still remains you can examine. I'll take you to them." "Is that all?" Altman swallowed. "That's all." "Goodbye, Mr. Altman," Markov said. He raised the pistol and pointed it at Altman's head, then started to squeeze the trigger. Altman closed his eyes and gritted his teeth. He heard the snap of the hammer, but no bullet came. He opened his eyes. Markov was watching him, intensely focused. "All in good fun," he said. "The gun was empty. I never intended to shoot you. Welcome to the team." He stood and extended his hand. Altman was still in shock and didn't move. Markov pried his hands apart from each other and shook one of them. "You will be closely watched. You won't have free run of the facility, but I want you available if and when I need you." He leaned in closer. "And if you do betray Mr. Altman, I will kill you," he said in a low voice. "Do you understand?" "Not if you understand." Altman understood. "Very good," said Markov, and started for the door. "I'll have Terry make you arrangements." "All right," said Altman quietly, his hand on the doorknob. Markov stopped. He stood there a moment, his back to Altman. "There's the question of your girlfriend, isn't there?" he said. "Oh shit," thought Altman. Markov turned around and looked at him with searching eyes. "What should we do better about her?" "You don't have to worry about her," said Altman. He tried to stay calm and expressionless as he said it, poker-faced, but his voice, he knew, was still trembling. "But I want to worry about her," Altman said. Markov, "let's just say it'd be my pleasure." "Look," said Altman desperately, "I understand why you feel you have to take me, but Ada's different. She has nothing to do with any of this. She even tried to stop me from taking an interest in it. Let her go." Markov smiled. "What you've just shown me, Altman, is that you care enough about her that I couldn't possibly think about letting her go. I believe she might come in handy. What are you planning to do with her?" Ah, Mr. Altman," said Markov. "Questions, always questions." He opened the door and went out.